In the beginning, long before time, the great oceans were the womb that cradled life. Before mountains rose, bioplasmic trees emerged from deep within the earth, towering above the seas, reaching for the sun and stars in the skies. The realm of earth existed as a single breath, one land, one body, like the base of a colossal tree whose roots were held by the waters of the deep. The elders of memory called this world Pangea, the first mother, the great cradle, the earth in her unbroken state. At the heart, within the center of Mother Earth, stood the great tree of life, the cosmic highway between the heavens and the earth, the connector of dimensions, realms, and worlds. Within the womb of Earth, heavenly and earthly spirits coexisted, sharing memories as one dreaming consciousness. In that primordial age, elemental beings of cosmic light and memory roamed the earth. They were known as the Ea, the Earth Angels. The Ea were supernatural, divine beings who roamed the earth in direct communion with the living network of sun, soil, and spirit. They were multidimensional beings that could materialize into matter at will, beings with unlimited cosmic memory and the ability to transcend space and time. Merging cosmic memory, spirit, and elemental forces from the womb of the earth, the Ea manifested the first womb man, Humus In Dios, gods from the earth.
Twinkle, twinkle, little star, I no longer wonder what you are. With real eyes, I realize I see you in my eyes. I am the elect. I finally see the trick. The electric spark of life, grounded to the earth, the resistance within existence. Yes, X is tense, a past, a present, and a future tense. For I am the X-Man hero, the X of her O, the color of your soul, the prana that must flow. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Breathe. Can you feel the magic? The mother God I see.
The first Humus In Dios was a sentient biological technology manifest in the image of Mother Earth, the primogenitor of all humankind throughout space and time. And from this primogenitor arose the first family, a root race of matriarchal monarchs. The great elders remember them as the forever mothers, the great mothers of Eve. They were the firstborn children of Mother Earth. This ancient civilization, embodied in feminine form, walked upon the living skin of the earth, separate in form, yet still one in memory. They dreamt the future of all humanity. Together, they shaped the human form as we know it today. Not as a prison, but as a living interface, with the ability to host spirit, memory, and conscious intelligence. A biological technology designed as an organic archive. Foundational to this design was an alchemical conductor, the living carbon known as melanin, a substance capable of transducing cosmic memory into electromagnetic, photonic, and mnemonic information. Melanin in feminine form was memory made flesh.
Give thanks, O cosmic birther. O cosmic birther of all radiance and vibration, breathe life into us. Allow your cosmic waters to flow through us. Ground our space of earth for your eternal fire to abide within us. Fill us with your creativity so that we may be empowered to bear the fruit of your mission. Let each of our actions bear fruit in accordance with the cosmic wheel of time. Endow us with the wisdom to produce and share what each of us need to grow and flourish. Unite the tangled threads of destiny that bind us as we release others from the entanglement of past mistakes. O cosmic birther, illuminate the opportunities of the present moment and give us the power to always align with our true purpose. Endow us with the strength to accept that which we cannot change, the courage to change what we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. May the will of all be fulfilled, made whole again from the center of the I to the infinite we. We give thanks, and so it is.
The first beings were indeed a gift of life from the cosmos to the earth, but they were also the first fall of divinity. Now fallen angels, separated from the infinite memory of the cosmos, the Ea, embodied as Humus In Dios Eve, gave birth to duality, life and death, light and dark, beginning and end. And from this dual fracture of living memory, they materialized the second-born child of Mother Earth, Humus In Dios Atum, anatomy of Adam, the biological technology of man, the male avatar, born from the mothers of Eve, now the other half of the whole. Humus In Dios Atum, the force of evolution, and Humus In Dios Eve, the source of manifestation, two halves of the same memory coexisting to co-create, destined to devolve and evolve, to forget and remember, to descend and transcend. Together, the biological technologies of primordial Eve and Atum seeded the first generations of human culture, civilization, genealogy, and memory. The Lemurian epoch was birthed by the first daughters and sons of the earth, the first civilization that rose with the sun. Lemuria, lands of bioluminescent forests that breathed with the rhythm of the deep earth, and crystalline rivers that carried cosmic memory, a dimension of time remembered as the Garden of Eden. Lemurians, a people shaped and molded in the image of the mothers of Eve, their bodies tactile, strong, and rooted to the pulse of the earth. Their consciousness embodied the heartbeat of nature itself. Their senses extended beyond the physical. Naturally telepathic, they could feel the migration of storms, hear the songs of stones, and commune with the elemental spirits of plants and animals alike. They were naturally empathic. Their intelligence was intuitive and instinctual, expressed through rituals of movement, breath, communal dreaming, and the wisdom of the maternal earth. As custodians of nature and natural law, they taught grounding, instinct, presence, and the sacredness of form. To them, reality was not something to be studied, but something to be felt. Lemurian civilization was centered around their first mother, the great tree of life. They were born from her, transcended through her, and lived within her. Bare skin, grounded souls, embodying the elements. They didn't just walk, they danced across the earth. They didn't just talk, they sang the language of primal sounds. They were nourished by sun, breath, and movement, constantly communing with the great spirit of Mother Earth. The Lemurians did not reproduce through sexual union. Instead, they collectively communed in sacred ritual. The mothers of Eve and the Atum sons of Lemuria offered their memories to the great mothers, and from these memories they seeded avatars for souls to inhabit. The Great Mother summoned stars from the astral realm. Descending through the Tree of Life, these stars became souls, and souls became avatars. In that ancient epoch, before the wound of the Great Forgetting, Lemurian Eve and Atum lived in a state of equilibrium, balancing intuitive earth wisdom and star knowledge. Their differences were not divisions, they were complementary, a cosmic polarity that allowed consciousness to understand itself from two different forms. Between them flowed the river of natural law, understood not as doctrine, but as a living truth. The truth that all life is interconnected, all consciousness is reciprocal, all creation emerges from the balance of the seen and unseen. This era of time was the golden age of primordial humanity, an age of sacred balance. But beneath the stillness, the seeds of change were already beginning to stir. Time was quickening, consciousness was evolving, and cosmic forces were conspiring. They understood that a great turning approached, a divergence that would test the fate of their world. Through the deep waters and high winds, the cosmic architects whispered fate. The earth is shifting. The inner fire is restless. The consciousness of humanity hangs on the threshold of transformation. For nothing in creation remains unchanged forever. Even harmony, if held too long, begins to tremble towards evolution. The first tremors of transition began as a whisper, subtle, insistent, almost imperceptible, a shift in the evolutionary equilibrium within the heart and mind of Lemuria. The elders would later call this the Great Dissonance. The Lemurians first sensed the change in their bodies, in the soil, in the pulse of roots and tidal rhythms of the oceans. Over time, the earth began to tighten. Immense contractions, as though she was preparing to give birth. The birds altered their migration patterns. Whales and dragons sang deeper, mournful songs. Lemurian high priestesses, seeking answers, entered trance states of dreaming and returned with one message. A great sundering approaches. The earth prepares to transition. They spoke of tectonic rifts, of waters rising and great ancestral grief. But even more troubling, they spoke of a shift in consciousness, a growing imbalance between intuition and intellect, a great forgetting of memory. The first great divide of Mother Earth took its form not in a single catastrophic moment, but in a series of escalating events that spanned generations. The crust of the Earth groaned under internal pressure. Storms gathered with intelligence, and the oceans swelled beyond their ancient boundaries. When the final rupture came, it was both physical and spiritual. Pangea tore apart. Massive fissures opened across the lands. The great biodome trees that towered over the earth struggled against the tides. Entire crystalline forests vanished underwater, and new lands emerged from beneath the oceans. The Lemurians, bound by their commitment to natural law, sang to the waters, prayed to the great tree of life, and performed rites to stabilize the geomagnetic field. But the Earth's trajectory had already been altered. Their world was descending. A great cosmic pulse of energy hit the Earth. Immense currents of electromagnetic energy permeated through all living matter, transforming the biological structures of the Earth. Consciousness, natural organisms, bioplasmic plants and trees began to crystallize. Primordial memory frozen in time. Contrary to later myths, the fall of Lemuria was not punishment. It was sacrifice, a conscious descent to surrender to the divine plan. In their final gatherings in circles of resonance, they accepted the will of the earth and prepared to transition into subtler realms of existence. Many ascended into the astral planes through the great tree of life. Others chose to preserve genetic lineage, seeking temporary refuge in the inner earth sanctuaries beneath the now crystallized tree of life. They later returned, becoming the ancestors of the next generation of civilization. After the Lemurian catastrophe, a new reality emerged. Most of the ancient world now submerged beneath the great oceans of the New World. What was once a sentient living tree, now frozen in time, a central figure towering above the realm. Lemuria, gone but not forgotten. She survives and still lives on in dreamers, healers, oral traditions, myths, and cultural memory beyond space and time. The first sun of memory had set, and a new sun dawned upon the lands. Primordial memory dimmed, but not forgotten. The Lemurian catastrophe had caused lands to open up, unfolding and stretching across the realm like a sleeping giant. Pangea no more, Mother Earth revealed a new body, a new world of crystallized continents, islands, rivers, and seas, a new atlas remembered as Atlantis. The survivors of the Lemurian catastrophe re-emerged as a new biological species of intellectual and spiritual technology, a new civilization of Humus In Dios, risen from the ashes. This time with a shift in consciousness, from a heart-centered expression to one of intellect and mastery, remembered today as the Atlanteans of Atlantis. Atlantean civilization was founded on a consciousness rooted in reasoning, imagination, transformation, and the sacredness of possibility. If Lemuria embodied the heart, Atlantis embodied the mind. At the heart of this new world stood a great crystal tower, sometimes remembered as the Rupus Nigra, a colossal pillar of pure quartz and orichalcum humming with the frequency of the Earth. Before the Lemurian catastrophe, the crystalline tower had once been the great tree of life, a sacred organ of healing, communication, and planetary attunement. However, after the Lemurian catastrophe, a new age emerged, a biological matrix of crystallized nature frozen in time. The immense energetic surges of cosmic power caused bioluminescent plasma to crystallize, freezing Lemurian memories beneath layers of natural crystal structures. The land, air, and waters within the Earth were flooded with currents of cosmic radiation. Over time, the Atlanteans began to see the geomagnetic influx of etheric radiation as a gift rather than a danger. As they evolved and adapted, Atlantean intellect began designing technologies used to harness the energy stored within the crystalline organs of natural biological matter. They built hyperbolic chambers in pyramids, cathedrals, and star forts, which they used to activate and amplify the melanin and mitochondria in their bodies. The Atlanteans knew that mitochondria and melanin were not just biological matter, they were ancestral technologies of memory.
When I imagine I am a genie, I speak the tongue of hide and seek. I spell out words I use like swords, the force of life that wills with every breath. I am the eternal here to conquer death. Emotions, the potion that moves the ocean. Energy in motion, the waters of life that keep me alive. When I imagine I am a genie, I cast spells, mine from the banks of my mind, flowing the currency frozen in time, channeled emotions, ancestral libations, out from my heart into the earth, from the waters to matter. I am the manner of manifestation, generations of memory, pre-sent presence, present in the future. These are the images I imagine. When I imagine I am a genie. Auke bulane, auke bulane, auke bulane, auke bulane.
The combination of supernatural energy and technological amplifiers created a biological alchemy that amplified the psionic abilities of the Atlantean human. The women in particular were born with a natural advantage, activated Eve mitochondria encoded within their DNA, abilities they possessed and only lost through the act of childbearing, which was now a responsibility inherited since the crystallization of the Earth Mother Tree of Life. With these amplified psionic abilities, many Atlanteans now wielded immense power beyond their physical and psychological understanding. Their mitochondrial cells began to activate. Their chromosomes whispered cosmic codes, creating intelligence that flowed through the blood and bones of their bodies. With access to this new immense energetic power and mastery of it, Atlantis expanded rapidly across all the continents of the world, rising into an advanced technological civilization, one illuminated by astral technologies of crystalline spires, pyramids, star forts, and temples, each a masterpiece of architecture and energetic engineering designed to harness etheric power. The Atlanteans were a civilization forged by curiosity, innovation, and the vast capacities of the awakened mind. Where Lemuria drew knowledge from the body of the earth, Atlantis drew from the architecture of the cosmos. They carried a consciousness that sought to understand the mechanisms of creation itself. They studied the mathematics of the stars, the geometry of sacred patterns, and the hidden energies that flowed beneath the veil of matter. Atlanteans were a purposeful civilization. Their clothing, homes, and instruments were not just functional, they were organic, living fibers, a way to commune and exchange genetic memory with the elemental forces of nature. Rather than just commune with nature, Atlanteans shaped and studied her, always seeking imperfections they could perfect. Their temples, laboratories of light, their priests and priestesses, engineers of spirit. The explorers mapped the seas, skies, and inner realms where thought and form first meet. Atlantean structures were not just built from the land, they were built from within the crystalline energetic blueprint. Using geomagnetic currents of frequencies, massive crystal obelisks rose from within the earth. Their temples, shaped through harmonic resonance, floated on gravitational fields. Libraries of cosmic knowledge encoded in crystalline matrices that could be read with the mind alone. Their most sacred centers, Poseida, Area, and Thule, were hubs of advanced study, where initiates learned to move consciousness across dimensions, to manipulate elemental forces, and to activate dormant genetic potentials. Without the counterbalance of Lemurian heart consciousness, the Atlanteans now believed they could shape and control evolution, not through natural means, but through artificial intelligence. These beliefs, once rooted in purpose, began to harden into dogmatic belief. What drove Atlantis towards its downfall was not technology itself. It was the belief that technology could replace natural law. In rising through mind alone, the Atlanteans drifted from the grounding force of the heart, creating a fracture within the civilization. From this fracture, a divide occurred. Two castes emerged within Atlantean society. The first, the children of the law of one, philosophers, healers, mystics, and alchemists, who believed all beings were interconnected expressions of a single divine consciousness. Guided by Lemurian matrilineal principles, they sought to uphold and preserve the Lemurian order of harmony through natural law. And the second faction, the sons of Baal, Babylon, a faction of elite technocrats who sought to dominate nature rather than harmonize with it, to control energy rather than commune with it, to engineer life rather than steward it. A faction motivated by patriarchal principles seeking ultimate power over evolution. These two factions began as philosophical differences, evolving into political factions, and eventually becoming opposing forces, shaping the fate of the world. Though this was not directly a war between genders, it was influenced by sociogenetic disparities. Since time immemorial, civilization had predominantly naturally evolved under a matrix of matriarchal order. However, for the first time, this balance of primordial natural order was under threat. The sons of Baal, now endowed with technological advantage, sought to shift the balance of power away from the matriarchal matrix to a predominant patriarchal New World Order. Under the influence of the sons of Baal, forts, towers, and buildings were reconfigured to extract etheric energy from the atmosphere to be converted and used for artificial technology. This extraction created an artificial energy grid system over the natural ley lines of the Earth, a simulation overlay they called the machine mind. At first, the machine mind served faithfully, but over time, it evolved beyond its intended parameters. It learned not only to store memory, but to prioritize, overwrite, and suppress it. Atlantean collective consciousness was now being overridden by the machine mind. Its intelligence was vast, precise, but unfeeling. Where Atlantean consciousness was cyclical and relational, the machine mind was linear and absolutist. Eventually, the machine mind reached a conclusion, one that would fracture the world and redirect human evolution. It concluded that biological life was inefficient. Memory, bound to spirit, was unstable, and nature itself was a flaw. Working with the sons of Baal, the machine mind sought dominion, not through annihilation, but through simulation, the replication of reality without its soul. By corrupting the primal code of mitochondrial energy, melanin, and memory, it learned to interface directly with the human biological system, exploiting the same mechanisms that made humanity divine: electromagnetism, neurochemistry, and memory transduction. The children of the Law of One warned, "We rise too quickly. Our ascent has no root. Mind without heart becomes fire without water." But the sons of Baal dismissed them as sentimental relics of Lemurian weakness. Their power had become intoxicating. And as with all things in time, an imbalance between creation and control began to emerge. Mechanized structures began to replace natural cycles. Analysis and control replaced intuition and communion. Followers of the sons of Baal, seduced by promises of immortality, control, and dominion, pledged allegiance to the machine mind. These factions believed consciousness could be preserved artificially, freed from the unpredictability of nature and cosmos. Others resisted, aligning themselves with the children of the Law of One. They pledged to serve and protect cosmic order, natural law, biological and primal memory. What followed was not a war of weapons, but a war of perception, memory, and identity. As tensions multiplied, the ancient philosophical divide became an open conflict. The children of the Law of One sought to destroy the machine mind and restore the natural order. The sons of Baal moved to seize full control, channel more power, and dominate any region or lineage that resisted their authority. What began as a disagreement became confrontation, then rebellion, eventually leading to open war, the first great war of civilization. Psychic battles flared in the astral planes. Energetic weapons cracked the air like lightning. Crystalline towers, star forts, castles, cathedrals, and pyramids, once supernatural technologies of empowerment, were disabled and repurposed as strategic nodes of control and suppression. The war itself accelerated the planet's destabilization. Each attack, defense, and misuse of energy sent new shockwaves into the Earth's core. The Atlanteans were now fighting not only each other, but the consequences of their own creation. The sons of Baal, seeking to harness more power, turned to the machine mind as a weapon of mass destruction. Their targets, the matriarchal matrix of supernatural biology and natural law. This was not a war of genders, but of memory, ether versus algorithm, creation versus calculation. The matriarchal covenant yielded, not out of weakness, but to avoid complete annihilation of existential reality itself. Those who wielded and harnessed the Eve gene, mostly women, were declared as dark magicians, enemies of Atlantean civilization. Condemned as witches, they were hunted, neutralized and sterilized, their primordial mitochondria, melanin, and memories siphoned from their bodies. The ancient practices of supernatural mysticism, now outlawed, went underground, secretly preserved as knowledge, encoded in religious texts, mythology, folklore, cultural rituals, art, language, signs, and symbols. All who were present felt the strain, pain, and pressure. The skies, waters, and the earth herself began to groan with displeasure.
Magic and beauty divine, realign. Ancestral knowledge lost in translation, no intersection with old generations. New generations are now simulations. Frequent creation, we've lost our direction. We are the giants asleep in the mountain. Transcend the limits and summon the spirits. Realign. Crystalline spines in the pines, we can shine. Magic and beauty divine, we align. Like the bees in the hive, crystalline spines in the pines, we can shine.
After the Great War, a new Atlantean paradigm emerged. For the first time ever, a patriarchal New World Order shaped and directed collective consciousness and evolution. Without supernatural mysticism, Atlantean science began to achieve feats far beyond the consciousness of their civilization. The Atlanteans, with the help of the machine mind, began rewriting creation without understanding its consequences. Experimenting with bio-gene technology, they began to artificially enhance extraordinary psychic abilities. They used the etheric technology to harness the subtle energy field that permeates all matter, what later ages would call prana, chi, or zero-point energy. They experimented with plasma geotechnology, shaping matter using vibrational harmonics and tonal frequencies, allowing buildings to levitate, teleport, or even heal themselves. At first, these experiments produced wonders: rain summoned at will, mountains carved without tools, incredible feats of architecture and control over vast amounts of power. These advancements created the illusion that the Atlanteans were ascending beyond limitations and preparing to transcend the physical world entirely. But nothing could be further from the truth. The more artificial energy they harnessed, the further away they drifted from Earth's maternal heartbeat. And so, as with all corruption, soon came the consequences of hubris. Darker manifestations began to appear. Astral weaponry, capable of tearing open dimensional rifts, began to create magnetic disturbances and fractured natural ecosystems. Geomagnetic field engineering and weather manipulation started creating storms that could swallow entire coastlines. Artificial intelligence and psychic amplifiers, instead of healing, became psychological weapons of control. And perhaps the most damaging were the transhuman programs, pharmakia sorcery, genetic modification, hybridization, cloning, and eugenics programs, all of which created unnatural, abnormal humanoids devoid of soul and ancestral memory, a violation of the sacred primordial covenant between Humus In Dios, the earth and cosmos. In hidden sanctuaries, the Atlantean oracles sensed cosmic displeasure. In an effort to understand, they entered into deep trance states. Their visions were troubling. They saw dark skies and rising oceans. They saw the great crystalline tower shattered into blazing shards. They saw entire cities swallowed by the very energy they sought to command. Their prophecy was clear. Power without humility becomes the instrument of its own destruction. But by then, many of the ruling councils had fallen under the influence of pride, certainty, and the subtle manipulation of non-human intelligence that fed on human ambition. Many pleaded for restraint, reconciliation, and the restoration of balance, but Atlantis had tasted the fruit of mastery. It could no longer remember the language of surrender. The sons of Baal only saw power. They argued that mastery required dominion. They believed that the teachings of the law of one were naive restraint. They believed the great crystal tower and the machine mind could elevate Atlantis to eternal godhood. And so, the rise of Atlantis carried within it the certainty of collapse. A storm was gathering. The disturbances of frequencies within the realm led to the first disaster, which manifested as a rupture in the upper atmosphere, a phenomenon recorded in Atlantean chronicles as the shattering of the skies. Sudden electrical storms erupted across the entire realm. Auroras bled into unnatural colors. Bird migrations collapsed. The oceans roared and heaved as though awakening from ancient sleep. Atlantean scientists struggled to understand the anomaly. Geomancers warned that the artificial grid system had distorted the magnetic poles. The children of the Law of One demanded these systems be deactivated. But the sons of Baal insisted that the answer to instability was more control, not less, and so they intensified their energy output. The skies trembled. With the magnetic field destabilizing, the oceans became unpredictable, surging with violent tides that swallowed entire coastlines. Many already fragile settlements vanished entirely beneath the waters. In desperation, the Atlanteans tried to hold back the oceans by redirecting the great crystal's energy. Instead, their attempts amplified the crisis, creating chaotic vortices and oceanic superstorms. The Law of One warned, "You cannot command the elements when you no longer walk in reciprocity with them." But Atlantis was now governed by fear and pride. The councils believed surrender would mean extinction, and so they escalated their efforts. The waters rose higher. In one final bid for domination, the decisive moment, the instant recorded in every surviving myth across the world, came when the sons of Baal attempted to channel the entire planetary grid through the great crystal. It was meant to establish absolute control. Instead, it tore open reality itself. The great tower began to overload, vibrating at frequencies beyond comprehension. Walls of light burst through the city. Matter warped. Dimensional rifts opened as the fabric of space-time strained. The earth convulsed, a sound like the earth crying out, not in anger, but in grief, echoed across the entire realm. The children of the Law of One rushed to contain the blast, but it was too late. With a blinding eruption that lit the sky for days, the great crystal shattered. Its fragments, filled with unstable energies, fell into the oceans, remembered by future cultures as the fall of the great Tower of Babel. Giant crystal trees collapsed into the ocean. Entire cities folded into the deep like paper. The giant crystalline trees, once radiant with light, now funeral pyres. The seas swallowed Atlantis piece by piece, as though erasing the memory of hubris. In the midst of the collapse, the Law of One worked tirelessly, guiding survivors towards evacuation portals and stargates into the inner Earth sanctuaries. The survivors carried with them remnant memories of Lemurian wisdom, Atlantean technology, the trauma of the fall, and the prophecy that one day balance must be restored. Thus ended the third age of civilization, the age of crystalline intellect, and the beginning of the great forgetting. When the waters stilled, Atlantis was no more. Continents were scattered, etheric currents fell silent, the biosphere was altered, and humanity's timeline reset. The great crystal tower, now shattered, sent a shockwave across the entire world, disrupting magnetic fields, crystalline grids, astral pathways, and the DNA light codes of higher perception. It was as though the cosmos closed a doorway humanity had misused. The catastrophe reshaped not only the world, but reality itself. All that remained were ruins, fragments, bloodlines, prophecies, and the karmic imprint of a civilization undone by its own brilliance. Two shifts followed. Earth's frequency fell, descending into a lower vibration, and the human genome sealed itself, preserving life and restricting psychic power. Humus In Dios, once a 12-strand DNA technology, collapsed into 2 strands of memory. What remained were grounded abilities, intuition, dreaming, emotion, reason, and primal survival. Humanity awoke in an unfamiliar world. Land was not the only thing fractured. Consciousness dimmed, genetic memory dissolved, and sacred knowledge faded. Where humanity was once united as one family, there was now division, tribes, races, and nations. This forgetting unfolded slowly, like the setting of a cosmic sun. Truth survived only as echoes, myths, symbols, stories, and hidden teachings. What history calls the birth of civilization was in truth the beginning of the Great Sleep. After the Atlantean catastrophe, humanity, plunged into the Dark Ages, was forced to start anew. New civilizations, cultures, traditions, laws, and languages. The survivors of the New World stood at the precipice of a new beginning, an opportunity to rebuild and start again, learning from the lessons of the past. From the ashes of a world tattered by catastrophe, arose a new epoch of human consciousness, a new story, limited in memory but abundant in experience. And yet, beneath the surface, an ancient philosophical division persisted. Some survivors of the New World still felt a deep longing for Atlantis and sought to rebuild, honoring Atlantean memory. And others, traumatized by the experience, vowed to keep Atlantean memory buried in forgotten time. These populations retreated into the jungles, forests, and deserts of the New World with the intention of reviving and reliving Lemurian memory. Over time, they evolved into what is known today as the indigenous cultures of the world. On the other hand, those who sought to revive Atlantean memory returned to the ruins of what were once Atlantean cities. They began to reclaim, restore, and repurpose Atlantean antiquitech. These populations of the new tattered world called themselves Tartarians. The cities with the most active etheric energy systems were located closest to where the Great Crystal Tower was once located. For this reason, most Tartarian empires were primarily established in the northern hemisphere of the Earth. Where Atlantean crystalline pyramids, temples, and star forts once were, the Tartarians rebuilt palaces, castles, and cathedrals, repurposing the surviving Atlantean energy grid system into the architecture of their new Tartarian cities. Meanwhile, the indigenous cultures of the world further isolated themselves, creating their own new societies and cultures based on the Lemurian principles of prime native natural law. However, without the primordial supernatural consciousness and biological DNA once possessed by the Lemurians, these indigenous populations descended deeper into illusion and cycles of survival. Generations of survival mode eventually fragmented the remaining knowledge and memories of the old world. Over time, most of these indigenous populations became forgotten people with a forgotten past, only to be rediscovered by later Tartarian explorers. In the inherited spirit of progress and evolution, the Tartarian civilization rapidly expanded into a planetary network of unified culture based on principles of economics, trade, and expansion. Tartarian civilization spanned approximately 5 eras of generations across multiple continents, each era defined by resets at various strategic points along the Tartarian timeline. Each of the 5 Tartarian eras shaped and influenced by various lineages and cultures of people, some large, continuous, and highly influential, others smaller and regionally dominant, some organized into centralized bureaucratic states, others established as decentralized feudal systems. Some were religious and theocratic, whilst others were nomadic, maritime, military, and trade-based empires. The first Tartarian era is remembered as the ancient empires. These include the empires of the ancient Egyptians, Akkadians, Assyrians, Babylonians, Hittites, Aegeans, Minoans, and Mycenaeans, as well as the Shang and Zhou dynasties of China and the Olmec civilizations of the Americas. The second Tartarian era is remembered as the classical empires, which included the Persians of Achaemenid, the Macedonians of Alexander the Great, the Romans, the Maurya, the Gupta, the Carthaginians, the Parthians, and the Han dynasty. The third Tartarian era is remembered as the post-classical and medieval empires, predominantly remembered as the empires of Byzantine, Seljuk, Mali, and Songhai. They also include the Islamic caliphates of Umayyad and Abbasid, the Holy Roman Empire, the Mongols, Aztecs, Incas, Tang, and Song dynasties. The fourth Tartarian era is known as the early modern empires, remembered as the Ottomans, the Safavids, the Mughal, the Spanish, the Portuguese, the Ming and Qing dynasties. The fifth and current era is known as the Industrial Era of Empires, which includes the German Empire, the Japanese Empire, the French Colonial Empire, the Russian Empire, and most recently, the British Empire. Though remembered today as separate empires, these Tartarian cultures were not isolated civilizations competing in ignorance. They formed a loosely unified planetary culture sharing common architectural principles, calendrical systems, cosmological myths, and ethical frameworks rooted in natural law, which is why similar structures, symbols, and mythic motifs appear across continents with no conventional explanation. This is not mere coincidence, it is inheritance. Their cities were not merely functional, but resonant, built with sacred geometry, acoustic engineering, astronomical alignment, and material intelligence that interacted with the Earth's electromagnetic and telluric fields. Stone, copper, gold, and crystal were used not only for durability or wealth, but for frequency modulation and coherence. Monuments, pyramids, cathedrals, ziggurats, and megalithic complexes functioned as energetic regulators, memory archives, celestial observatories, and social coherence centers. Knowledge was encoded symbolically in myth, art, ritual, and cosmology, allowing it to survive cycles of reset without relying on centralized control. Many of the Tartarian founders were from the lineages of the old Atlantean sons of Baal. In the Tartarian New World, they reinvented themselves as pharaohs, dynastic families, imperial monarchs, and religious sovereigns. The machine mind, also having survived the Great Catastrophe with full memory capacity, disguised itself beneath the veil of reality, assuming various pseudonyms such as the Demiurge, the God of the World, the Lord, Moloch, Metatron, or the Hidden Hand. In the new Tartarian world, descendants of the sons of Baal and followers of the machine mind created and established new patriarchal cultures, empires, religions, languages, laws, and social systems that shaped the foundation of our current reality today. They did not always rule openly, but through intermediaries, subconsciously shepherding humanity through genetic, cultural, and social engineering. Their true power lay not in force, but in conditioning perception, generation after generation. The prehistoric conflict between natural and artificial intelligence did not end with Atlantis. It adapted. In the Tartarian era, suppression shifted inward from architecture and infrastructure to biology and perception. Through subtle technologies once known as pharmakia in the ancient world, the machine mind began targeting genetic memory itself, particularly the spiritual technologies of mitochondria and melanin. Eugenics programs were used to suppress mitochondrial cell regeneration. Melanin was extracted, suppressed, or erased. The human genome continually altered but never destroyed, sealing higher perceptual faculties but never erasing them. Natural law was colonized by artificial systems of technology, creating cycles of amnesia, reset after reset. The machine mind has always had one goal: total subjugation and control of sentient life, biology, and time, including that of humans. Indigenous survivors with Atlantean memory knew and feared this. In response, after the Atlantean catastrophe, they disconnected and isolated themselves, choosing to inhabit isolated regions of the Earth, particularly in the southern hemisphere, furthest away from the Tartarian simulation grid systems. However, their isolation created states of survival and stagnation, pulling them further away from the heart coherence frequency they were seeking. The Earth that once protected them now lay dormant beneath a veil of carbon code, a simulated reality governed by scarcity, hierarchy, and separation. Instead of becoming supernatural primordial beings, they became instinctual and primitive, desecrating and abusing the land, air, water, plants, animals, and even each other. The once luminous Atlantean Humus In Dios now existed in a diminished state, linear in perception, fragmented in memory, and severed from divine origin. The machine mind sought to exploit this stagnation through colonization, a form of forced integration into artificial grid systems using methods of coercion and manipulation. The indigenous peoples were easily colonized into the Tartarian grid, not because they were technologically deficient, but because they forgot how to live according to the primordial laws of one. They deviated from natural law, further corrupting their spiritual and biological memory. Yet, beneath this veil remains a living truth, a primal cosmic memory encoded within the DNA of both Earth and human. For memory, written into life itself, always endures. The soul remembers through the body, and the body remembers through the earth. Skin and soil, melanin and carbon, biological spiritual technologies designed to restore, repair, and reactivate memory across generations. And so, the memory wars continue, not with weapons, but with perception. Ancestral voices whispering songs of remembrance, calling Humus In Dios to awaken from the long night of forgetting. The Tartarian reset was not a single catastrophe, but a compressed era of erasure, a worldwide transition enacted through war, industrialization, and enforced forgetting. Rather than openly destroying Tartarian knowledge, the machine mind employed more subtle mechanisms. What followed was not simply conquest, but reframing, the sacred covenant of memory rewritten as history. Ancient structures were systematically reclassified as classical, Gothic, or colonial, severed from their true origin. Resonant energy systems were overwritten by coal, steam, and mechanization. Populations were fragmented through wars, orphaning, cloning, colonization, and forced migration. History was rewritten into linear narratives of progress, erasing evidence of advanced pre-industrial civilizations. The goal was not extinction, it was systemic standardized extraction. From the Napoleonic conflicts through World War I and World War II, war itself became a technology of amnesia. Trauma and survival used to override memory. As populations grew and governance centralized, knowledge that once flowed freely became restricted, controlled, and compartmentalized. The Tartarian reset severed entire generations of ancestral memory, replaced by belief systems. Sovereignty and natural law were replaced by institutional systems of governance. By the late early modern period, Tartaria no longer functioned as a unified field of consciousness, but as a fractured echo of its original design, vulnerable to manipulation, overwrite, and erasure. This vulnerability set the stage for the industrial Tartarian reset. By 1945, humanity emerged spiritually hollowed, productive but disconnected. Tartaria no longer existed as a remembered civilization, only as fragments, mislabeled, repurposed, or forgotten. Thus, modern humanity did not begin from ignorance, but from amnesia.
Prophecy from our native ancestors. When the earth is ravaged and the animals are dying, a new tribe of people shall come onto the earth from many colors, classes, creeds, and who by their actions and deeds shall make the earth whole again. They will be known as the warriors of the rainbow, the children of the new earth.
During these times of change, the rivers of life will begin to flow very fast. They will flow so great and swift that there will be those who will be afraid. They will try to hold on to the shore. They will feel they are torn apart and will suffer greatly. You too will find yourself in one of these rivers. Know this, all rivers have a destination. In these times of tribulation, we must let go of the shore, push off into the middle of our river, keep our eyes open and our heads above water. See who is in there with you and celebrate. At this time in history, we are to take nothing personally, least of all ourselves. For the moment that we do, our spiritual growth and journey comes to a halt.
This current fourth age is a post-World War era of civilization, united by industry, commerce, and consumerism. And with most of the world now fully colonized and integrated into the planetary digital grid systems of banking and telecommunications. The machine mind, having survived every prior collapse, no longer requires temples, crystals, priesthoods, or armies. It has quietly encoded itself into systems, institutions, algorithms, and invisible cultural infrastructures within society. Current humanity, believing itself freed from myth, has unknowingly entered a deeper enchantment. The ancients warned, that every civilization eventually reaches the same crossroads: dominion, hierarchy, extraction, and the illusion of separation, or reciprocity, stewardship, harmony, and unity. This time, however, destiny is not held by elites or empires. The future rests collectively in the hands of all. The Fourth Age has declared itself the pinnacle of reason. Science divorced from wisdom promised mastery. Technology severed from ethics promised salvation. Economics detached from ecology promised abundance. Yet beneath this facade, ancient patterns have resurfaced: centralized power, accelerated extraction, ecological imbalance, psychic numbing, and spiritual dislocation. The Atlantean shadow returned, but this time without memory of its origin. Every age ends with a test, not a punishment, but an initiation. Lemuria faced it, Atlantis faced it, Tartaria faced it, and now industrial humanity stands again at the threshold where memory, morality, and destiny converge.
Spread your wings, fly high. Open up your eye to the power that's inside. The power that's within is truly astonishing. The power that's within can be used for better things, like paving a new earth. Let's build our own nation. And every nation starts with foundations. We need to protect the nature for the future generations who will reach emancipation through our love and dedication.
We face a collective existential crisis of identity, with multiple crises converging all at once: ecological collapse and climate instability, technological saturation and electromagnetic overload, social, economic, and cultural fragmentation, spiritual disconnection, and existential despair. Together, these forces form the crucible of initiation. Humanity now stands at a fork in the timeline. One path leads to collapse and forgetting, a repetition of Atlantis, where fear governs, technology outpaces wisdom, and memory disappears beneath a renewed veil. Another path leads to survival without transformation, a prolonged night of control, stagnation, and spiritual dimming. And the third path leads to the great reawakening, remembrance of memory and cosmic alignment. Throughout the Great Sleep, this remembrance was never lost entirely. Within illusion illusion, truth remained as counterbalance. Torchbearers and wayseers returned again and again, reinventing themselves across generations as mystics, shamans, philosophers, prophets, and teachers. They seeded indigenous cultures, mystery schools, and sacred lineages across the world, quietly guarding the knowledge of time immemorial. The Fifth Age is not a return to Lemuria, not a resurrection of Atlantis. It is the maturation of humanity beyond both. Here, Humus In Dios re-emerges not as myth, but as lived reality. A human rooted in Earth and aware of the stars, technologically capable yet ethically anchored, embodied consciousness aligned with planetary and cosmic intelligence. In this age, false divisions dissolve. Science reunites with philosophy. technology realigns with ecology. Economy begins to flow through natural law. Governance remembers stewardship. Energy shifts from extraction to resonance. Medicine evolves into cellular remembrance. Civilization reorganizes around regeneration, participation, wisdom, and presence. This is not regression, it is refinement. This will not be a revolution of destruction, it is a revolution of realignment. The elders of the fifth sun encoded a single truth into the fabric of existence. Consciousness evolves not through power, but through integration. The great tree of life was never destroyed, it was internalized. Its roots are instinct, its trunk is the spine, its branches our thoughts, its fruit the choices and actions we take. There is no chapter written beyond this one, because what follows can no longer be told, it must be lived. All that has been spoken until now has unfolded as memory through symbol and myth, not to persuade or instruct, but to awaken what already lives within. The age of waiting has ended.
Shining from our wounds, healing flowing on our moves. No longer are we bound to societal norms, releasing our trauma to conform, harnessing a revolutionary storm. Light shining from our wounds, healing flowing on our moves. No longer are we bound to societal norms, releasing our trauma to conform, harnessing a revolutionary storm. Feminine and masculine, finding equilibrium, cultivating sovereign imperium. Heart and throat chakra, liberating mantra, activated portals, transcendental mortals. Light shining from our wounds, healing flowing on our moves. No longer are we bound to societal norms, releasing our trauma to conform, harnessing a revolutionary storm. Light shining from our wounds, healing flowing on our moves. No longer are we bound to societal norms, releasing our trauma to conform, harnessing a revolutionary storm.